What if I told you that in just a few months, one African leader rewrote his country's laws, reshaped regional alliances, challenged military boundaries, and delivered a warning that shook armed groups across the Sahel, all without asking permission from the West? In Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré didn't start with speeches, he started with power. First, a new criminal code that sent a clear message about who now defines national values. Then, a bold regional move, a Sahel alliance identity system linking Burkina Faso with Mali and Niger, signaling a future outside old frameworks. Days later, a foreign military aircraft makes an emergency landing, and instead of panic or submission, Traoré enforces sovereignty, detains the crew, then releases them on his own terms. And finally, in December, a warning to terrorists so direct that it left no room for negotiation: leave or be eliminated. This isn't a collection of random events. This is a pattern, and once you see it, you'll understand why Burkina Faso is no longer playing by anyone else's rules. In September 2025, Burkina Faso quietly crossed a legal line it had never crossed before. No mass protests, no dramatic announcement broadcast to the world, just a vote inside a transitional assembly and a signature that reshaped the country's criminal law for the first time in decades. Under President Ibrahim Traoré's transitional government, Burkina Faso formally adopted a new criminal code. Buried inside that legal overhaul was a provision that made consensual same-sex relations a criminal offense, punishable by prison time and financial penalties. For supporters, it was framed as a reaffirmation of national values and social order. For critics, it marked a sharp turn away from international human rights norms. But for Burkina Faso itself, the move represented something larger than one law. It signaled how power, sovereignty, and identity are being redefined under Traoré's rule. To understand why this law matters and why it happened now, you have to understand the political moment Burkina Faso is living through. A country under transition, not normal politics. Burkina Faso is not operating under a normal democratic cycle. Since the 2022 military takeover that brought Ibrahim Traoré to power, the country has been governed by a transitional framework. Elections were postponed, institutions were restructured, the military assumed a central role in decision-making, justified by a security crisis that has displaced millions and killed thousands. Traoré's government has consistently argued that Burkina Faso is in an existential phase, fighting terrorism, reclaiming territory, and breaking dependency on external powers. In that context, the leadership has treated legal reform not as a matter of liberal consensus, but as an instrument of state consolidation. The criminal code rewrite was part of that broader reset. Officials described it as a modernization effort, updated outdated statutes, strengthening penalties for corruption, terrorism, and organized crime, and aligning the law with what they call Burkinabe moral foundations. The inclusion of same-sex relations as a criminal offense was justified internally not as a new obsession, but as a clarification of norms that leaders said already reflected social reality. What the law actually says, without exaggeration. Before 2025, Burkina Faso had no explicit law criminalizing consensual same-sex relationships between adults. At the same time, there were no legal protections either. The issue existed in a legal gray zone, largely governed by social norms rather than statutes. That changed with the new criminal code. According to the adopted legislation, consensual same-sex sexual acts are now classified as criminal offenses, carrying penalties that include imprisonment, reported in the range of 2 to 5 years, and fines. The law applies regardless of gender and is written into the penal framework alongside other morality-based offenses. There is no evidence that the law was introduced following mass public demand or a referendum. It was passed through the transitional legislative process, dominated by figures aligned with the current military government. What matters here is not just the content of the law, but the message it sends. Sovereignty over alignment. Since taking power, Ibrahim Traoré has repeatedly rejected the idea that Burkina Faso must align its internal policies with Western expectations. His speeches emphasize sovereignty, cultural independence, and resistance to what he describes as external moral pressure. From the government's perspective, the criminal code reform fits that philosophy. Officials and supporters argue that social legislation should reflect local values, not international advocacy agendas. In this framing, rejecting Western liberal norms becomes part of the same struggle as rejecting foreign military bases or economic dependency. This is why the law was passed despite predictable international criticism. Burkina Faso's leadership appears to have calculated that diplomatic backlash would be manageable and that asserting control over social policy would strengthen its domestic legitimacy among conservative and traditional communities. Reaction inside Burkina Faso: silence is not approval, but it is stability. One striking feature of the law's passage was the absence of large-scale unrest. There were no nationwide protests, no major urban uprisings, no visible mass resistance. That does not necessarily mean widespread support, but it does reflect the political environment of the country. Public space for dissent is limited, media operates cautiously, civil society organizations are under pressure. At the same time, many Burkina citizens prioritize security and survival over abstract rights debates, especially as large parts of the country remain affected by violence. In rural areas, where traditional norms dominate daily life, the law aligned with existing social attitudes. In urban centers, reactions were more mixed but muted. For Traoré's government, that muted response reinforced a belief that the decision would not destabilize the country internally. International response: criticism without leverage. International human rights organizations condemned the law, calling it a violation of privacy and equality. Western governments expressed concern. Advocacy groups warned that the legislation could encourage discrimination and abuse. But condemnation did not translate into concrete consequences. There were no new sanctions directly tied to it, no aid suspensions explicitly linked to it, no diplomatic isolation beyond statements of concern. Burkina Faso's strategic importance in the Sahel and its growing alignment with regional partners like Mali and Niger limited external leverage. In effect, the response highlighted a changing reality. Western influence on domestic policy in parts of Africa is no longer assumed. Part of a wider ideological shift. This law should not be viewed in isolation. It sits alongside other actions taken by Traoré's government, expelling foreign military forces, tightening control over NGOs, restructuring education narratives, and promoting a nationalist discourse centered on discipline, order, and sacrifice. Together, these moves suggest a leadership style that prioritizes cohesion over pluralism, authority over debate, and sovereignty over integration into global liberal norms. Supporters argue that this approach is necessary in a country fighting for survival. Critics argue that it risks entrenching authoritarianism and marginalizing vulnerable groups. Both interpretations exist, and both are incomplete on their own. What happened beyond Burkina Faso? What happened in Burkina Faso matters because it may signal a trend. As several Sahelian states distance themselves from Western political frameworks, social policy could become another front in the broader push for ideological independence. Laws once avoided to maintain international approval may now be pursued precisely to demonstrate independence from it. In that sense, the new criminal code is not just about sexuality, it is about who decides what kind of society Burkina Faso will be. And under Ibrahim Traoré, that answer is increasingly clear. Decisions will be made internally, quickly, and without asking permission. Whether that path leads to stability or repression remains an open question. But what is undeniable is this: Burkina Faso has chosen its direction, and it is no longer looking over its shoulder. The Sahel region, stretching across the heart of West Africa, has long been a zone of both promise and peril. While rich in natural resources and young, vibrant populations, these countries have faced decades of insecurity, political instability, and fragmented governance. Within this challenging landscape, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have been taking bold steps toward a new model of regional integration, one that asserts sovereignty while improving coordination across borders. This story centers on one of the most significant initiatives of late 2025, the launch of the Sahel Alliance Identity Card System, championed by Burkina Faso's interim president, Ibrahim Traoré. On December 2, 2025, Traoré became the first head of state to receive the newly issued biometric Sahel Alliance Identity Card, a landmark moment for the region. This identity system represents more than just a card. It is a tangible expression of a broader political and economic vision, fostering cooperation among the member states of the Alliance of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and creating the infrastructure for a common citizen registry that can streamline movement, security, and governance. Traoré's decision to personally adopt the card underscores his commitment to regional integration while simultaneously asserting Burkina Faso's autonomy. The card is not connected to the West African ECOWAS system, signaling a deliberate move towards Sahel-focused governance. By focusing on local priorities and regional collaboration, the Sahel Alliance seeks to reduce dependence on external powers while improving operational coordination on issues ranging from border security to public service delivery. Historical context, documentary style. To fully appreciate the significance of the Sahel Alliance Identity Card, one must understand the historical backdrop. For decades, West African nations have relied heavily on regional and international organizations for policy guidance, infrastructure projects, and security interventions. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, has played a central role in regional integration. Yet many of these efforts have been top-down, bureaucratic, and slow to respond to the unique challenges of the Sahel. The Sahel, spanning from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea, is characterized by porous borders, nomadic populations, and frequent security challenges. Traditional governance structures often clash with modern state systems, creating gaps in enforcement and social services. By creating a dedicated alliance of Sahel states and implementing the identity card, leaders like Traoré aim to build a framework tailored specifically to the region's realities. Technical overview of the identity card. The Sahel Alliance Identity Card is biometric, featuring encrypted personal data, fingerprints, and facial recognition. It is designed to be universally recognizable across the 3 member states, allowing citizens to access healthcare, education, and government services seamlessly. In addition, the card functions as a security tool, enabling border and law enforcement authorities to verify identity quickly and accurately. Traoré emphasized that the card system will not merely serve bureaucratic needs, it is also a symbol of empowerment for the citizens of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. In his speech during the launch, Traoré highlighted that the card represents the capacity of our nations to govern ourselves, to protect our people, and to cooperate without external interference. Regional impact, documentary style. The launch of the identity card system has wider implications. For the first time, a West African initiative focuses explicitly on regional citizenship within the Sahel, creating the infrastructure for shared governance, mutual assistance, and coordinated security. The project also sets the stage for future integration in trade, travel, and education, providing a foundation for a unified Sahelian economy. Beyond administration, the identity card has psychological and political significance. Citizens now see tangible evidence of their government's commitment to collaboration. It reinforces the sense of belonging to a shared Sahelian identity while respecting national sovereignty. Challenges and critiques, documentary style. While the system is ambitious, it is not without challenges. Implementation requires robust data infrastructure, trained personnel, and the trust of local populations. Critics warn that insufficient outreach or technical failures could undermine public confidence. Moreover, security challenges remain. The Sahel is plagued by extremist groups whose presence threatens both citizens and state operations. Any identity system must be accompanied by ground-level enforcement, community engagement, and cross-border intelligence coordination. Despite these challenges, Traoré and his administration are pushing forward, viewing the identity card as a strategic investment in regional stability. Its adoption signals a new era of governance in the Sahel, where member states can take initiative, strengthen sovereignty, and improve public services through technological and administrative innovation. Conclusion. Documentary tone. The Sahel Alliance identity card represents more than a piece of plastic or a digital file. It embodies the vision of a new Sahel, one in which cooperation, sovereignty, and regional identity coexist to address long-standing challenges. Through Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso is signaling to its neighbors and the international community that West Africa can chart its own path, balancing innovation, security, and collaboration. As the region continues to evolve, the Sahel Alliance identity card may become a blueprint for other African initiatives, a symbol of how pragmatic regional integration can coexist with national pride and how leadership can translate policy into tangible, transformative action. In early December 2025, an unexpected aviation incident quietly tested diplomatic relations between Nigeria and Burkina Faso, two West African nations navigating a tense regional security environment. What began as a routine military flight quickly turned into a sensitive cross-border issue, drawing attention to how Ibrahim Traoré's government handles sovereignty, security, and diplomacy at the same time. On December 8, 2025, a Nigerian Air Force aircraft made an emergency landing inside Burkina Faso. According to official Nigerian statements, the aircraft encountered technical difficulties mid-flight and was forced to land for safety reasons. The plane was not on a combat mission, nor was it carrying weapons for hostile use inside Burkina Faso. However, in a region shaped by insurgency, coups, and foreign interference, any unplanned military landing carries serious implications. Burkina Faso's authorities immediately detained the aircraft and its crew, a total of 11 Nigerian Air Force personnel. The decision was not framed as an act of hostility, but as a standard security precaution. Under Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso has adopted a strict posture toward military activity within its borders, especially activity involving foreign forces. For nearly 2 weeks, the detained crew became the center of quiet diplomatic negotiations. During this period, there were no public accusations, no aggressive statements, and no escalation on either side. Instead, both governments chose a controlled diplomatic approach, signaling a shift in how Sahel states manage military incidents compared to the past. Nigeria confirmed that it was in direct communication with Burkina Faso's transitional government. Nigerian officials emphasized that the aircraft's landing was accidental and that the mission posed no threat to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Behind closed doors, diplomats worked to prevent the situation from escalating into a regional dispute. On December 18, 2025, Burkina Faso officially released all 11 Nigerian Air Force personnel, ending the standoff. The release was widely interpreted as a diplomatic success, not only for Nigeria, but also for Traoré's government. The message was clear. Burkina Faso would enforce its sovereignty firmly, but it would also resolve disputes through negotiation rather than confrontation. This incident highlighted a key characteristic of Ibrahim Traoré's leadership style. Unlike previous eras where similar situations might have been influenced by external powers or international military alliances, Burkina Faso handled the issue bilaterally, without outside mediation. No Western military forces were involved, no international pressure campaigns were visible. The resolution came through direct African-to-African dialogue. For Traoré, the incident reinforced 3 strategic priorities. First, territorial control. No foreign military movement is treated casually. Second, regional diplomacy. Disputes are managed with neighboring states, not external actors. And third, image discipline, avoiding public drama while maintaining authority. The release of the Nigerian crew also sent a broader regional signal. As Sahel countries move away from traditional Western security frameworks, they are developing their own rules of engagement. emergency landings, intelligence operations, and military coordination are now treated as matters of sovereign negotiation, not informal understandings. While the incident ended peacefully, it served as a reminder of how fragile regional security remains. A technical malfunction became a diplomatic test, and how that test was handled revealed much about the evolving power dynamics in West Africa. For Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré, the message was subtle but firm. Respect our borders, communicate clearly, and sovereignty will be enforced, but diplomacy remains open. In mid-December 2025, President Ibrahim Traoré delivered one of his most direct security messages since taking power. At a time when Burkina Faso continues to face pressure from armed extremist groups across its northern and eastern regions, Traoré addressed the nation with a clear warning. Armed groups must leave Burkinabe territory or face decisive military action. The message was not framed as a political speech, it was a security declaration. Traoré's government described the address as part of an ongoing national mobilization to restore territorial control and protect civilians. Unlike earlier years when Burkina Faso relied heavily on foreign forces and external mediation, this warning emphasized self-reliance, national defense, and internal command. According to state and regional reporting, Traoré's warning came amid intensified military operations by Burkinabe forces and allied local defense units. The government stated that operations were expanding into areas previously considered inaccessible, signaling a shift from defensive containment to active territorial recovery. What made this message significant was its tone. There were no references to negotiations with armed groups, no appeals to international intervention. Instead, the speech underscored a firm stance. Security decisions would be made in Ouagadougou, not abroad. Traoré also linked the terrorism issue to sovereignty. He argued that instability had been used for years as a gateway for foreign influence, intelligence operations, and prolonged dependency. Ending terrorism, in his framing, was not only about safety, it was about reclaiming political independence. The warning resonated across the Sahel. Neighboring states, particularly Mali and Niger, have adopted similar language in recent months, reflecting a broader regional posture shift. Rather than relying on multinational missions, Sahel governments are asserting national command over counterterrorism strategies. International reaction to the speech was cautious, while human rights groups continued to call for civilian protection and accountability. There was little direct pushback from foreign governments. Analysts noted that Burkina Faso's leadership appeared confident that decisive language would strengthen domestic morale rather than provoke external pressure. For Traoré's supporters, the message reinforced an image of resolve, a leader unwilling to compromise on territorial integrity. For critics, it raised concerns about escalation and humanitarian risks. But regardless of interpretation, the speech marked a continuation of Traoré's broader approach: clear lines, firm authority, and reduced reliance on outside actors. As Burkina Faso moves forward, this December warning stands as a defining moment in the country's security narrative, not because it announced a new war, but because it clarified who now claims ownership of the fight.